The ISO on the Sony was cranked up way too high, but I didn't care. The light coming off the New River Gorge Bridge was doing that thing where the steel looks less like metal and more like smoke trapped in a grid. It was 5:45 a.m. The air was heavy, smelling like wet, decaying leaves and river mud, the kind of cold that finds the gap between your gloves and your jacket sleeve. "You're obsessing, Cal," Drew said. He was leaning against a hickory tree, chewing on a plastic stirrer from a gas station coffee cup. "Light's not even hitting the water yet." "That's why I'm obsessing," I said, locking the tripod head. "If I wait for the light, I miss the gradient. You know this." Drew just shrugged. That was Drew. Nothing rattled him. He was the guy who could sleep on a jagged rock and wake up saying he felt refreshed. He was here to fly the drone and haul the heavy gear. I was here to sell the shots to an outdoor lifestyle magazine that wanted Appalachian grit. Marla, our guide, wasn't looking at the view. She was looking at the tree line. She was a local, hired because the trail we were on wasn't technically on the map, and the Park Service gets touchy about off-trail photography. She was a small woman, mid-40s, wearing layers of fleece that made her look wider than she was. She'd been twitchy since we parked the truck. "We shouldn't stay in this spot too long," Marla said, her voice tight. "The ground isn't stable here. Slope erosion." "It feels fine, Marla," I said, not looking up from the viewfinder. 10 minutes. Then we moved to the overhang. I took 3 steps to my left, trying to frame a piece of the rusted Core 10 steel against the fog rolling off the river. The ground was soft, a mix of half-frozen mud and pine needles. I snapped a burst of 5 shots, checked the histogram, and frowned. Underexposed. I stepped back to my original position to swap lenses. That's when I saw it. It's funny how the brain works. It tries to categorize things instantly. Boot print, it says. Mud. Mess. But then the pattern recognition software in your head jams because the data doesn't fit. Right next to my footprint, my heavy, lug-soled Vibram boot print, was another impression. It was fresh. Water was still seeping into the heel depression. It was a bare foot. "Drew," I said, "did you take your boots off?" "What? It's 30 degrees, Caleb. Why would I take my boots off?" I looked down again. The print was right next to mine. Parallel. As if someone had been standing shoulder to shoulder with me while I took that last burst. But the disturbing part wasn't the lack of a shoe. It was the anatomy. It was the exact same size as my size 12 boot. Not just the length, the width. The way the weight was distributed. I put my boot next to it. The arch of the barefoot print matched the curve of my boot perfectly. It was like looking at an X-ray of my own foot, pressed into the mud next to me. "Marla," I asked, trying to keep my voice flat. "Anyone else out here this morning?" "No," she said. She didn't come look. She actually took a step back toward the trail. "I told you, we need to move." "Check this out, though," I said to Drew. Drew walked over, crunching through the brush. He looked down, squinted, and laughed. "Gnarly. Probably some meth head from Fayetteville doing a polar plunge run. West Virginia, man." "It matches my foot, Drew. Exactly." "You got generic feet, Cal. Come on, light's hitting." He was right about the light, but my stomach turned over. I looked around. The woods were dense here, rhododendrons creating a thick, tangled wall of green and brown. Silence usually feels peaceful in the morning, but this felt suppressed, like a hand over a mouth. I shook it off. I'm a professional. I don't get spooked by footprints. "Get the drone up," I told Drew. "I want a top-down of the bridge shadow before the sun burns the fog off." Drew nodded and pulled the Mavic out of the hard case. The whine of the rotors starting up usually cuts through the atmosphere, making everything feel like a tech demo, which helps ground you. He sent it zipping up through the canopy, breaking into the open air above the gorge. I went back to my camera, but I couldn't focus. I kept glancing at the rhododendrons. I felt exposed. "Hey, come look at this," Drew said. He was staring at the controller screen, his eyebrows knitted together. "I'm busy." "Seriously, Cal, look." I walked over. The screen showed a grainy 4K live feed of the underside of the bridge. The massive steel arch was gray against the white mist. The river was a dark ribbon hundreds of feet below. What am I looking at? The catwalk, Drew said. Under the road deck. He zoomed in. The connection was a little spotty because of the interference from the steel structure, so the image kept freezing and jumping. There, he pointed. On the maintenance catwalk, right in the center of the span, there was a figure. It was tall. Too tall. It looked like it was wrapped in gray rags or maybe just naked skin that matched the fog. It was standing perfectly still. Maintenance guy? I suggested. At 6 a.m. on a Sunday, without a vest? And look at the arms. He was right. The arms hung too low, past the knees. It's a glitch in the feed, I said. Compression artifact. Watch, Drew said. On the screen, the drone hovered. The figure was static. Then, the feed hiccuped. A split-second black screen as the signal refreshed. When the image popped back, the figure was 5 feet closer to the drone. It hadn't walked. The posture hadn't changed. It was just closer. Wind, I said, though I didn't believe it. The drone drifted. I have GPS lock, Caleb. The drone didn't move. Drew tapped the screen to adjust exposure. The screen blinked black again. When it came back, the figure was gone. Where'd it go? Drew panned the camera left, then right. Nothing but steel and fog. Wait, I said. Look down. Drew tilted the gimbal down toward the river. Nothing. He panned back up to the catwalk. The figure was there again. But this time, it wasn't standing. It was crouching on the railing, facing the camera. And it was huge. The face was just a blur of pixels, but I got the distinct impression of a mouth that was open way too wide. The screen glitched again. Longer this time. 3 seconds of static. When the feed returned, the camera was spinning wildly. Shit, Drew muttered, fighting the sticks. I lost stabilization. Compass error. Magnetic interference. Bring it back, Marla said. Her voice was right behind my ear, making me jump. Bring it back right now. I'm trying, Drew snapped. It's not responding to RTH. On the screen, the spinning slowed, revealing the tree line where we were standing. The drone was looking at us now from high above. There's the truck, Drew said. There's us. I looked at the tiny dots on the screen. There was the silver speck of my Tacoma. There was Marla's red jacket. There was Drew's blue hoodie. And there was me, in my green parka. And standing right behind me, on the screen, was a fourth figure. I spun around. Nothing. Just the trees. The empty trail. Did you see that? Drew whispered, staring at the controller. See what? It's gone now, he said. He looked pale. Cal, on the screen. It was standing right behind you. Pack it up, I said. My mouth tasted like copper. We're done. I told you. Marla was hyperventilating now. I told you the slope wasn't stable. The vibe here is wrong. This is the old coal side. We shouldn't be here. Stop talking about vibes, Marla. Drew, land it. I can't. Battery just dropped to 0. It's falling. We heard the crash a few seconds later. A plastic crack echoing somewhere in the dense brush about 200 yards down the slope toward the cliff edge. $2,000, Drew groaned. I have to get it. The SD card has the footage. Leave it, I said. I'll buy you a new one. No way. That's my custom rig. Drew started attaching his radio to his belt. I have the last GPS ping. It's right behind that big boulder outcrop. 5 minutes. Drew, don't, Marla said. She grabbed his arm. Her grip was white-knuckled. Don't go down there. Drew shook her off, but gently. Marla, chill. It's 6:30 in the morning. I'm just grabbing the drone. You guys pack the tripods. He jogged off toward the boulder. I watched him go. I wanted to stop him, but my stubbornness kicked in. It was broad daylight. We were grown men. If I let myself get scared by a camera glitch and a footprint, I had no business being in the field. I started collapsing the tripod legs. Click, snap, click, snap. The mechanical sound was comforting. He's not coming back, Marla whispered. Stop it, I snapped. You're the guide. You're supposed to be the cool head. I'm a guide for tourists. I guide people on the boardwalks. I don't come out here. Then why did you take the job? Because I needed the money, she hissed. But money doesn't help you against that. Against what? She didn't answer. She was staring at the boulder where Drew had disappeared. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Drew! I yelled. The sound barely traveled. The fog seemed to swallow it. Drew! Give me a shout! Nothing. I checked my phone. No service. New River Gorge is notorious for dead zones, but we had bars at the trailhead. I'm going to get him, I said. Stay here. I'm not staying here alone, Marla said. She was shaking. Then come with me. We walked toward the boulder. It was a massive slab of sandstone, covered in lichen. The ground dropped off sharply behind it, a steep tumble of rocks leading down to the river. I rounded the corner. Drew? The woods here were different. Darker. The rhododendrons grew into a tunnel. I saw the drone. It was smashed against a tree trunk, the gimbal hanging by a wire. The battery was smoking slightly. But no Drew. Drew, quit screwing around, I shouted. Anger was easier than fear. Let's go. I'm over here, Cal. The voice came from down the slope, maybe 50 yards. It sounded calm, casual. Jesus, man, I exhaled. Are you hurt? My leg's stuck, Drew yelled back. Need a hand. Okay, hang on. Keep talking so I can track you. I started picking my way down the slope. The leaves were slick. Marla stayed at the top, refusing to descend. Drew, say something. Just past the ridge, Cal. Hurry up. I stopped. The voice hadn't come from down the slope. It had come from my left, directly west. I turned my head. Drew? Yeah, I'm right here. Come on. That response came from the right. East. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I stood perfectly still. Drew, where are you exactly? I shouted. I told you I'm right here. It happened simultaneously. From the left. I told you I'm right here. From the right. I told you I'm right here. Same cadence, same pitch, same inflection. It wasn't an echo. An echo delays. An echo fades. These were two distinct sources, speaking in perfect unison. Marla? I yelled up the hill. No answer. Marla! I looked back up toward the boulder. Marla was gone. Drew, this isn't funny, I screamed. I grabbed a heavy branch from the ground, gripping it like a bat. It's not funny, Cal, the voice on the left said. It's not funny, Cal, the voice on the right said. They were getting closer. I could hear the brush crunching, not the heavy stomp of boots. The soft, wet slap of bare feet. I shined my flashlight. The sun was up, but the canopy was so thick it was dark down here, to the left. The beam cut through the mist. I saw a shape moving behind a hemlock tree. It was wearing a blue hoodie. Drew? I breathed. The figure stepped out. It was Drew. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking up at the sky, his mouth hanging open in a slack jaw. He was walking with a strange, loping gait, his knees bending too much. And he was barefoot. Drew, what the hell are you? What the hell are you? The voice didn't come from the Drew in front of me. The Drew in front of me didn't move his mouth. The voice came from behind me. I spun around. Another Drew stepped out of the rhododendrons. Same blue hoodie, same slack jaw, same bare feet. My brain broke. I literally felt a snap in my perception. A moment where the world ceased to be logical and just became a nightmare. There were two of them. They looked identical to my friend, but they weren't him. They were like 3D prints that hadn't cured properly. The skin looked waxy, the eyes too wide, unblinking. The Drew on the left took a step. Slap. The Drew on the right took a step. Slap. Taking the shot, Cal, the left Drew said. Taking the shot, Cal, the right Drew said. It was a recording. They were playing back things he had said earlier. I didn't think. I didn't strategize. I ran. I scrambled up the slope, clawing at the mud. I dropped the camera. I heard the expensive lens shatter against a rock, and I didn't care. Behind me, I heard the footsteps. Fast, wet, slap, 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 slap. Gnarly! Two voices screamed in unison. Gnarly! 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 I hit the top of the ridge and sprinted past the boulder. The truck was a quarter-mile away. I have never run that fast in my life. My lungs were burning, my boots feeling like lead weights. I saw the truck. The driver's side door was open. Marla was in the driver's seat, frantically trying to turn the key, but she was in the passenger seat. Wait. I skidded to a halt 10 yards from the truck. Marla was sitting in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead, her hands on the wheel, frozen. But standing outside the truck, banging on the window, was Marla. The Marla outside was screaming, "Let me in! Open the door!" The Marla inside turned her head slowly to look at me. She smiled, but the smile went too wide. It stretched past her cheeks, revealing too many teeth. The Marla outside saw me. "Caleb, run! That's not me!" I bolted past the truck. I didn't stop for the truck. I didn't stop for Marla, either of them. I hit the main road and I ran down the center line until a coal truck blared its horn and slammed on its brakes. The metal grating of the suspension bridge vibrated under my boots, sending a low-frequency hum all the way up my shins. We were deep in the throat of Tallulah Gorge, 1,000 feet of quartzite violently carved out by water that wasn't currently flowing right. "Yo, Miles! How many more steps?" Rico yelled. His voice boomed, bouncing off the canyon walls, shattering the peace of the place. "There are over 1,000 stairs to get back up, Rico," I said, adjusting the strap of my messenger bag. It was loaded with field recorders and a heavy hardbound copy of Appalachian Haints, which I now regretted bringing. "Pace yourself." "Pace myself? I'm an animal, bro. I'm a mountain goat." Rico flexed, gripping the cable railing. He was wearing a tank top despite the October chill in the shadows. He started whistling. A sharp, piercing tune, something aimless and loud. "Stop it," Carmen said. It wasn't a request. Carmen was walking 5 feet behind him, her arms crossed tight over her chest. She was smaller than Rico, dark-haired and usually quiet, but her eyes were darting around the tree line like she was expecting an ambush. "Babe, relax. It's a whistle," Rico laughed, doing it again, louder this time. 2 sharp notes, 1 low. "I said stop," Carmen hissed. She grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his tricep. "My abuela told me. You don't whistle in the woods, not in wild places. It calls things." Rico rolled his eyes at me. "You hear this? Miles, you're the folklore guy." "Tell her she's crazy." I hesitated. "I'm a grad student at UGA. I deal in taxonomy, in the categorization of oral traditions, not in belief. But looking at the sheer, vertical walls of the gorge, seeing how the light died before it hit the bottom, I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. "Actually," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral, "there are traditions about it. In the Andes, it calls the tunche. In Appalachia, some say it attracts the hide-behinds, or signals the devil. It's generally considered bad form." "Nerds," Rico muttered, but he stopped whistling. "Both of you. Total buzzkills." We moved off the bridge and down toward the permit-only section, the gorge floor. This was the slider rock area, where the water usually rushes over smooth stone, creating natural water slides. Today, the dam release was low. The river was a churning, aggressive gray ribbon, loud enough that you had to raise your voice to be heard. The hike down had been grueling, but the gorge floor was alien. The rocks were massive, house-sized boulders tumbled together by ancient geologic violence. The air was 10 degrees colder down here, smelling of wet slate and decaying pine needles. "Let's go to the edge of the Hurricane Falls pool," Rico said, jumping from one dry rock to another. "I want a selfie with the spray." We followed him. I was watching my footing, thinking about the history of this place. The Cherokee called it Ugola, the Terrible. People died here, often. They slipped, they drowned, they jumped. Just last year, a tourist went over the rail. The energy here wasn't peaceful, it was hungry. We scrambled over a massive slab of granite, slick with moss. Rico was already at the water's edge, posing with a peace sign. "Take the picture, Carmen," he shouted over the roar of the falls. Carmen pulled out her phone, her hands shaking slightly. "Just hurry up, Rico." "I don't like it down here." I looked upstream. The water was violent, crashing over the jagged rocks with a sound like a freight train that never ends. It was a wall of white noise that filled your head, pushing out thoughts. And then, the door shut. That's the only way I can describe it. It wasn't a gradual fade. It wasn't the water drying up. The water was still thrashing. The foam was still flying. The falls were still pouring over the ledge. But the sound was gone. Instant, absolute silence. It was so sudden that I stumbled, my inner ear thrown completely off balance. The pressure in the air dropped like we'd been sucked out of an airlock. "My ears," Carmen whimpered. Her voice sounded tiny, flat, like she was speaking inside a cardboard box. Rico turned around, his mouth moving, but I couldn't hear him at first. Then, the audio of the world seemed to bleed back in, but it was muted. Wrong. No roar. Just the scuff of Rico's sneakers on the rock and the sound of my own breathing, which was suddenly ragged. "Rico," I yelled. "Did you feel that?" Why did the water stop? Rico looked at the river. "Bro, look at the water." "It didn't stop moving," I said, pointing. "It just stopped making noise." We stood there, 3 tiny figures in a massive stone wound, watching tons of water crash silently against stone. It was like watching a movie on mute. It felt disrespectful to the laws of physics. "We need to go," Carmen said. She was pale, her skin looking waxy in the dim gorge light. "Right now, up the stairs." "Wait," Rico said. He squinted, looking across the river, toward the sheer rock face on the other side. "Who is that?" I followed his gaze. The river at this section is about 40 feet across, deep and treacherous. On the far side, there isn't a trail. It's just a vertical cliff face that goes up about 300 feet, slick with slime and algae. There's nowhere to stand, nowhere to climb. But someone was standing there. About 2 feet above the waterline, on a tiny protrusion of rock no bigger than a dinner plate, was a child. It was a boy. He looked maybe 8 or 9. He was wearing a collared shirt that looked stiff, like heavy starch, and knickers, shorts that buckled below the knee, long socks, dark leather boots. He wasn't wet. The spray from the silent waterfall was drenching the rocks around him, but the boy looked bone dry. His clothes were crisp. "Is that a kid?" Rico asked. His bravado was cracking. "How the hell did he get over there?" "Don't look at him," Carmen whispered. She grabbed my arm, hiding her face in my shoulder. "Miles, don't look at him." I couldn't look away. My brain was trying to process the folklore, the data, the rational explanations. Costume photo shoot? Projection? Hallucination from altitude or gas? The boy was facing away from us, staring at the stone wall inches from his nose. He was standing perfectly still, arms at his sides. "Hey!" Rico cupped his hands around his mouth. "Hey, kid, you stuck?" "Rico, shut up!" I snapped. The sound of my own voice terrified me. It was too loud in the vacuum of the gorge. The boy didn't move. "He's gonna fall," Rico said, stepping closer to the water's edge. I gotta call 911. No service. Shit." "Rico, let's go," I said, grabbing his tank top. "That's not a hiker." "What are you talking about? It's a little kid." Rico shook me off. He waved his arms. "Hey, turn around! We're gonna get help!" The boy turned around. He didn't shuffle his feet. He didn't grab the rock for balance. He simply rotated at the waist, a smooth, mechanical swivel that shouldn't have been possible without moving his hips. His face was smooth. Too smooth. Like a doll that had been left out in the sun. The features were blurry, indistinct, except for the eyes. The eyes were sharp, dark holes that seemed to suck the light out of the air. He looked at Rico. Then he looked at Carmen. Then he looked at me. And he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a knowing smile. It was the smile of someone who has just heard a joke that you don't understand yet. "He sees us," Rico whispered. "He knows us," Carmen sobbed. Then the boy tilted his head. You know how a dog tilts its head when it's confused? A cute, 45-degree angle? The boy's head tilted to the right. Then it kept going, past the shoulder, past the horizontal. I heard a sound, clear as a bell in the silence. A dry crack, like a branch snapping in winter. His head was now upside down, resting against his right shoulder blade. the neck elongated and twisted like wrung-out laundry. But the eyes stayed level with us. They rolled in the sockets to maintain contact. "Run!" I said. Rico didn't move. He was paralyzed, his mouth hanging open. "Rico, run!" I shoved him, hard. That broke the spell. We scrambled back from the water, slipping on the wet rocks. "The whistling!" Carmen screamed. "You whistled! You called him! Just move!" I yelled. We hit the metal staircase that led up out of the gorge. It was a grueling ascent. Hundreds of metal steps bolted into the cliffside. Usually you have to take breaks. You have to breathe. We didn't breathe. We sprinted. My lungs burned like I had inhaled broken glass. My quads were screaming. Clang, 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 clang. Our boots on the metal were the only sound in the world. The river was still dead silent behind us. I risked a glance back when we were about 50 feet up. The rock where the boy had been standing was empty. Relief washed over me for a split second, until I looked down at the river directly below the grate I was standing on. The boy was there. He was standing on the water. He wasn't floating. He was standing on the surface of the churning, silent gray water, right below the stairs, looking up at us. His head was still upside down. And he was whistling. It was the same tune Rico had whistled. 2 sharp notes, one low. But it sounded wet, bubbly, like it was coming through a throat full of water. "He's following us!" Rico screamed. He was in the lead, taking the stairs 2 at a time. "Don't look down!" I shouted to Carmen. She was hyperventilating, stumbling. I shoved her forward, keeping my hand on her back. We reached the suspension bridge. We had to cross it to get to the rim trail. The bridge is famous for swaying. As we hit it, it swung violently to the left. Rico fell. He slammed his knee into the grating. "Ah, fuck! Get up!" I hauled him up by his armpit. "Look at the other side," Carmen whispered. I looked across the bridge to the far landing, the safety of the north rim. Standing in the middle of the trail, blocking our exit, was the boy. He was upright now. His head was back in the normal position, but his neck looked swollen, purple and bruised. He was holding his finger to his lips. Shh. The silence in the gorge deepened. It became a physical weight, pressing against my eardrums until they popped. "We can't go that way," Rico stammered. "Miles, we can't go that way." "We have to," I said, though my legs were shaking so hard I could barely stand. "We can't go back down." "He's gonna push us off," Carmen said. "Like the others." I looked at the boy. He was motionless. A statue in knickers and a starch collar. "I have the book," I murmured crazily. "I have the book." I fumbled with my bag, pulling out the heavy volume of folklore. I don't know what I planned to do. Throw it at him? Read an exorcism? I held the book up. "We mean no harm," I shouted. My voice cracked. "We are leaving. We are just passing through." The boy lowered his hand. He took a step toward us onto the bridge. The bridge didn't vibrate. He had no weight. Rico suddenly roared, a sound of pure terror and aggression. He grabbed a loose piece of rusted rebar lying near the support cable. Why was it there, I don't know, and charged. "Rico, no!" I screamed. Rico ran right at the kid. He swung the metal bar. He passed straight through the boy like he was smoke. Rico stumbled, his momentum carrying him forward. He hit the dirt on the other side, scrambled to his feet, and turned around. The boy was gone. "Come on!" Rico yelled, his face white as a sheet. "Come on!" Carmen and I sprinted across the bridge. The moment my foot hit the dirt on the far side, the sound turned back on. It was deafening. The roar of the river, the wind in the trees, the distant sound of a car engine. It all slammed back into place with the force of an explosion. We collapsed on the trail, gasping, clutching our ears. "Did you see that?" Rico was crying. He was a big guy, a gym rat, and he was curled up in a ball, sobbing. I went right through him. He was cold. He was so cold. "We need to get to the car," I said. "We aren't safe here." We hiked the remaining mile to the interpretation center in a tight cluster. Every squirrel that moved made us jump. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a footstep. We didn't speak until we were in Rico's Honda, drifting down Highway 441. "What was it?" Carmen asked finally. She was staring out the window, refusing to look at the woods. "I don't know," I said. "Folklore usually has rules. You whistle, you invite something. But that was specific. The clothes, the neck." I didn't tell them what I was thinking. I was thinking about the history of the gorge. I was thinking about the Victorian era, when tourists would come down in their Sunday best to see the falls before the dam was built. I was thinking about the stories of children slipping on the wet rocks, their bodies trapped under the ledges for days. We dropped Carmen off first. She didn't say goodbye. She just ran to her front door and locked it. Rico drove me to my apartment. He didn't turn off the car. "Miles," he said, gripping the steering wheel. "My neck hurts." "You probably pulled a muscle running," I said. "No," Rico whispered. "It feels tight, like someone is twisting it." He turned to look at me. For a second, just a fraction of a second, under the yellow light of the street lamp, I didn't see Rico. I saw the boy. I saw the starch collar. I saw the black holes for eyes. Then it was Rico again, looking tired and scared. "Get some sleep, man," I said, getting out of the car. I needed to be away from him. "Yeah, sleep," Rico said. As he drove away, I heard it. He wasn't playing the radio. The windows were up. But as the taillights faded down the street, I heard a whistle drifting back toward me on the night air. 2 sharp notes, 1 low. I went inside and locked every deadbolt I owned. I put a line of salt across the threshold, feeling ridiculous, feeling like a fraud of an academic. That was 3 months ago. I haven't seen Rico since. He dropped out of the group chat. Carmen told me they broke up 2 days after the hike. She said he changed. She said he started standing in the corner of the bedroom at night, facing the wall. She said he stopped talking and started making clicking sounds with his throat. I try to move on. I focus on my thesis. I stay out of the woods. But my apartment is quiet. Too quiet. I live on a busy street, but sometimes the traffic noise just cuts out, like a door shutting. And when that happens, I don't look at the corners of my room. I don't look at the mirrors. I just close my eyes and pray that I don't hear the whistling. Because yesterday, I woke up with a stiff neck. And when I looked in the mirror this morning, just for a moment, my head looked like it was tilting, just a little too far to the right. I hadn't planned on camping to find myself, or any of that. I just needed one full night where nobody yelled my name through a radio, nobody tugged on locked doors at 3 a.m., and the only thing I had to watch was a patch of trees staying put. That's how I ended up near Cumberland Falls with Eli and his sister Harper, dragging my beat-up cooler across crunchy leaves and pretending my lower back wasn't screaming. Eli made it a whole production, of course. He'd been talking about the gorge energy for a week, like he was the assistant manager of nature. He was the kind of guy who could turn a grocery run into an adventure, always cracking jokes, always getting distracted mid-sentence. He'd brought a bag of marshmallows the size of a pillow and a cheap plastic harmonica he couldn't play. Harper was the opposite. If Eli was a golden retriever in a flannel shirt, Harper was a boot. Solid. Practical. No wasted movement. She had her hair pulled back, a heavy flashlight clipped to her belt, and that look people get when they've accepted the world as mostly idiots, and they're going to have to survive anyway. "You sure this is the spot?" she asked, scanning the tree line like she expected something to step out and ask for directions. "It's close enough," I said. "We're not trying to sleep in the waterfall." Eli pointed with the confidence of a man who'd never been lost in his life, even when he clearly had. "Trail's right there. Falls are like 20 minutes. Harper, you're acting like we're in a horror movie." Harper didn't even blink. "In a horror movie, you'd be the first one dead." Eli grinned. "Yeah, but I'd die doing what I love, being annoying." I laughed, and it felt good. My last shift had been 6 hours of alarms that turned out to be a raccoon and one guy trying to climb a fence because he didn't see the sign. I'd wanted quiet so bad it felt like hunger. We set up camp in a small clearing away from the busier areas. Enough space for the tent and the fire ring, and enough trees around us to block some of the wind. The air had that damp Kentucky feel, like it had been stored in a cooler. The falls weren't visible from where we were, but you could hear them in the distance, low and constant, like someone breathing in their sleep. By the time we had the tent up, the sky was dimming into that blue-gray that comes before real dark. Harper checked the ground, checked the stakes, checked everything. Eli mostly told stories that didn't go anywhere. He was still talking when he suddenly stopped and pointed past the trees. "Dude," he whispered, like he'd seen a celebrity. "Look." At first I thought it was fog. A pale smear in the air near the direction of the falls, hovering over the gorge. Then it sharpened into something curved, faint but unmistakable. A stretched band of color, like a weak rainbow someone had tried to erase. Harper's face tightened. "No." Eli's smile got bigger. "Moonbow." I'd heard about it. Cumberland Falls was famous for it. A moonbow was supposed to happen when there was a full moon and enough spray from the falls and the conditions lined up just right. People drove for hours to see it. There were schedules online. You could buy souvenirs. The problem was, the sky above us was empty. No moon. No bright circle hidden behind clouds. Nothing. Just a darkening sky and a few early stars peeking out like they were unsure. "That's not possible," Harper said, and she sounded genuinely irritated, like nature had violated a rule and she wanted to file a complaint. Eli laughed softly. "It's mist and light, Harper. Chill." "I'm serious," she said. "It needs moonlight." I didn't say anything, because my brain was doing that thing it does when I'm at work, and a camera shows something that doesn't match what I'm seeing in front of me. Like the picture is correct, but the world is wrong. The bow sat there anyway, too thin to be pretty, too quiet to be impressive. It wasn't bright. It was worse than bright. It looked like it didn't need permission to exist. Eli pulled out his phone, tried to film it, and immediately complained about how it didn't show up right. "It's there," I said. "Yeah, I know it's there," he said. "I want proof. This is like... illegal." Harper stared at the pale arc for another few seconds, then turned away like she'd decided not to give it attention. "Let's finish up. It'll be gone." But it didn't go away. Not right then. It hung above the gorge as the light drained out of the sky, like a thin smile you couldn't wipe off. We ate hot dogs, burnt marshmallows, and whatever Eli called trail mix, which was mostly chocolate and stale pretzels. The fire popped and coughed. The trees creaked in the breeze. The falls kept breathing in the distance. Around midnight, Eli got that look he gets when he's been sitting too long. "I gotta stretch my legs," he said. "Let's go down toward the overlook for a sec, just to see it better." Harper didn't move. "It's late." "So," Eli said. "We're here. It's spooky moonbow night. Nolan, tell her." I should have said no. I should have been the responsible one. The thing about working nights is it messes with your sense of what's safe. Everything is quieter at night. Every noise is louder. Your brain starts filling in gaps just to entertain itself. "Just for a minute," I said. "We'll stay on the trail." Harper sighed like she was letting two dogs off a leash. "Fine. But if you slip and crack your skull, I'm not carrying you back." We grabbed our flashlights and headed out. Eli did this exaggerated sneaking walk for about 10 seconds before Harper told him to stop. The trail wasn't difficult, just uneven, with roots that grabbed at your boots and patches of slick stone. The air got colder as we got closer to the gorge, and the sound of the falls got louder, now a steady roar that you could feel in your ribs. When we reached the overlook area, the trees thinned and the ground dropped away. The gorge was a dark cut through the land, deeper than it looked in the day. The falls were off to the side, not fully visible from where we stood, but the mist was everywhere, drifting up like breath. The moonbow still hovered faintly above it, barely there, like someone had drawn it with a dying marker. Eli leaned on the railing and whistled softly. "Okay, that's insane." Harper swept her light around the trees behind us, then down the slope below the overlook. "Don't lean too far." "I'm fine," Eli said. "You worry like..." He stopped mid-sentence. I followed his gaze. Down below, near the waterline, someone was throwing stones. You couldn't see the person clearly. Just a small shape near the edge, lower than us by a lot. Maybe on a flat section of rock close to the river. The movement was rhythmic, arm back, arm forward. Another throw, another throw. And with each throw, we heard the little tick of stone hitting water. But there was no splash, no plop, no ripple sound. Just the clean tap, like the stone was hitting something solid. Eli's voice dropped. "Is that a kid?" Harper lifted her flashlight and aimed it down. The beam cut through mist and landed on a small silhouette. A child-sized figure, maybe 8 or 9. Too small to be alone out there at midnight. The light didn't show details, just outline. Narrow shoulders, short hair or hair pulled back, bare arms. The kid turned toward us and lifted a hand. It waved. Eli's face softened instantly because of course it did. "Hey!" he called, waving back like it was some neighbor kid across a yard. Harper snapped, "Eli, don't!" He kept waving anyway. "You okay down there?" The silhouette waved again. Then it lifted its other arm. Both arms moved in a friendly, exaggerated wave. Except one of them didn't move right. One arm hung lower, angled wrong, like it wasn't attached the way it should be. The hand on that side still lifted, still waved. But the elbow looked slack, and the forearm dragged behind the motion like dead weight. My stomach turned cold so fast it made my teeth ache. Harper's voice came out sharp and flat. "Stop waving." Eli lowered his hand slowly, like he'd just realized he'd been caught doing something embarrassing. "What the?" The silhouette kept waving. Not fast, not frantic. Slow. Patient. It looked like it was waiting for us to do something. Harper clicked her flashlight brighter and held it steady. "Hey, where's your parent?" No response. Just the waving. Another stone hit the water. Tick. No splash. Eli swallowed loudly. "Maybe it's messing with us. Like a prank. People do creepy stuff, you know?" Harper stared down hard enough to burn holes in the mist. "Pranks don't stand on wet rocks in the dark like that. And pranks don't—" She paused, jaw tightening. "That arm is wrong." The silhouette stopped waving. It tilted its head. Then it pointed very clearly, away from itself and along the riverbank. Toward the darker stretch where the gorge bent out of sight. Pointed like it wanted us to look. Eli's voice got smaller. "It wants us to follow it." Harper's answer was immediate. "No." The silhouette pointed again. More insistent. Then it turned and began to walk. Not away from the waterline toward safety. Not toward a visible trail. It walked along the edge like it belonged there, disappearing into the mist where the gorge curved. The small shape swallowed by dark. And the stone throwing stopped. For a second, all three of us just stood there listening to the falls and our own breathing. Then Eli said, "We should go." Harper didn't argue. She grabbed the back of Eli's jacket and pulled him away from the railing like she was yanking him off a train track. We started back up the trail fast. Not running, but too quick for conversation. My flashlight beam jittered with my steps. Every shadow between trees looked like a person. Every branch snap sounded like a footstep. Eli kept turning his head over his shoulder. "What if it's actually a kid?" he whispered. Harper didn't slow down. A kid does not wave at strangers in the gorge at midnight with a broken arm. "Maybe it's hurt," Eli insisted. "What if it needs help?" I hated that my brain snagged on the same thought. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt it too. That tug you get when you see someone vulnerable. Like if you don't do something, you're the bad guy. But then I remembered the stones hitting water without sound. The moonbow without a moon. The way that silhouette had looked up at us like it knew exactly where we were standing. Harper reached camp first, shoved the tent flap open, and started throwing things inside like she was packing for evacuation. "Get in." Eli hesitated, still staring toward the trees. "Harper, come on." "Eli," she snapped, and there was something in her voice that made him obey. We climbed in. Harper zipped the tent shut hard enough to make the fabric shiver. Inside was instant darkness and nylon smell. My heart thudded against my ribs like it wanted out. Eli sat cross-legged, hugging his knees, trying to laugh but failing. "That was... okay," he said weakly. "That was weird." Harper clicked on a small lantern and set it between us. The warm light didn't make me feel better. It just made the shadows outside look thicker. Harper leaned close to the tent wall, listening. "What?" Eli asked. "Shut up," she said quietly. We listened too. At first it was just the falls in the distance, constant and heavy. Then the wind. Then some small insect noise near the tent. And then a tick sound, like a small stone hitting something hard. It came from somewhere near camp. Eli's eyes widened. No. Another tick. Closer. But not on the ground. It sounded higher, like it hit a rock or a log. Something at waist height. Harper slowly reached for her flashlight. Another tick. Then nothing. I held my breath without meaning to. Eli whispered, "It followed us." Harper didn't answer. She eased the zipper down an inch, just enough to peek through, not enough to invite anything in. Her flashlight beam flicked out into the clearing. The fire had burned down to coals, red and low. The trees stood black and tall. Nothing moved. Harper swept the light left, then right, then toward the cooler. And the beam stopped. At the edge of camp, just beyond the ring of light, something small stood half hidden behind a tree. A shape too short to be an adult, too still to be normal. It lifted an arm. It waved. Eli made a sound in his throat like he'd been punched. He started to rise, like pure instinct. Like maybe his body wanted to go to it the same way you reach out when someone calls your name. Harper grabbed his wrist so hard I saw his fingers jerk. The silhouette stepped forward, just enough to show itself more clearly in Harper's beam. Child-sized, thin, head tilted, and that arm. The limp arm hung wrong, just like before. Except now I could see the hand on that side was open, palm facing us, like it was showing us something. For half a second my brain tried to make sense of it as an injury. A kid who fell, a kid who needed help. Then I realized the hand wasn't just open. There were stones stuck to it, not held in the palm, stuck to the skin like wet gravel pressed into flesh. The silhouette raised its other hand and waved again. Slow, patient, like it had all night. Harper's voice was barely audible. "Don't move." The silhouette took another step forward. The air around it looked wrong, like the mist was bending around its body instead of passing through. Like it was dry where everything else was damp. Eli whispered, "It's just a kid." Harper hissed, "No, it isn't." The silhouette's head turned slightly, not toward Harper's light, toward me, straight at me, and my skin prickled like something cold had slid down my spine. Then, very calmly, it extended its good arm and pointed again. Not toward the gorge this time, toward our tent. Toward where we were sitting, trapped in nylon like bugs under a cup. It wanted in. Harper didn't hesitate anymore. She yanked the zipper open all the way and blasted her flashlight beam directly at it. "Back up!" The silhouette didn't flinch. Harper reached out, grabbed a handful of dirt and dry leaves, and threw it like she was trying to hit a stray dog. The clump landed short. The silhouette stepped forward anyway, and then it smiled. I didn't see teeth. I didn't see lips. I saw the shape of a smile, like the outline of it existed without the face doing anything. Eli made a broken little sobbing sound. "Harper." Harper shoved past us out of the tent, boots scraping, flashlight aimed dead center. "Get in the car, now." "What?" I said. "Now," she repeated. I didn't argue. I grabbed Eli by the shoulder and hauled him out, half dragging him. The silhouette was still there, just inside the trees, watching. Harper backed up slowly, keeping the light on it, steering us toward the parking area where we'd left her SUV. Eli stumbled, almost falling over the cooler, and I yanked him upright. "Move," I whispered. Another tick sound, close, like a stone hitting the metal side of the cooler. Eli flinched hard. Harper didn't look away. "Don't stop." We reached the SUV. Harper fumbled her keys once, then got the door open. She practically threw Eli into the back seat. I dove into the passenger seat and slammed the door. Harper got in last, still aiming the flashlight through the open driver's door toward the clearing. She clicked it off only when her door shut. For a second we just sat there, 3 grown adults panting in a parked car like we'd run a mile. Eli whispered, "Did you see its hand?" I couldn't answer. My tongue felt thick. My mouth tasted like metal. Harper started the engine. The headlights washed over the trees and the tent and the fire ring. The clearing looked empty. No silhouette. No child. Just trees and mist, and our cheap gear scattered like we'd been careless. Harper put the SUV in reverse, and the back camera screen flickered. Just for a beat. Just a hiccup like electronics do sometimes. But in that flicker, I saw a small shape standing right behind the vehicle, too close. So close the camera couldn't focus. Then the image stabilized again. Nothing there. Harper slammed the gas anyway. Gravel sprayed. The SUV jolted backward, then swung around fast enough to make my stomach roll. We tore down the dirt road toward the main lot. None of us spoke until we hit pavement. Eli finally exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 10 minutes. What? What was that? Harper kept her eyes on the road. Something that wanted us to come down there. Down where? I said. She didn't answer at first. Her jaw worked like she was chewing something she didn't want to swallow. Then she said, "My cousin used to come here when we were kids. He told me there was a story." Eli sniffed, wiping his face with his sleeve. "A ghost story?" Harper's laugh was short and humorless. "He said sometimes people hear a kid at the water throwing stones, and if you follow the sound, you don't come back the same. If you come back at all." I stared out the window at the black trees flashing by. My hands were shaking now that we were moving, like my body had waited until it was allowed to panic. Eli said, "But why us?" Harper's voice went quieter. "You waved back." Eli went still. I thought about the silhouette's arm. The limp one. The stones pressed into its skin like the river had claimed it and wouldn't let go. I thought about the moonbow without a moon, hanging over the gorge like a warning sign that didn't bother to be obvious. And I thought about that tick sound, stone hitting water with no splash, like the river was listening, but refusing to answer. We drove until the falls were just a distant hum behind us, and the road signs started looking normal again. Harper didn't stop until we hit a bright gas station off the highway, the kind that felt aggressively alive at 2 a.m. Fluorescent lights, humming soda coolers, a guy cleaning the windshield squeegees like he'd done it 1,000 times. We sat there in the parking lot, engine idling. Eli stared at his hands like he couldn't trust them. "I didn't mean anything by it," he said, voice thin. "It was just a wave." Harper finally looked over at him. Not angry, just tired. "I know. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. Even in Harper's guest room, even with the door locked, my brain kept replaying that silhouette standing at the edge of our camp like it belonged there. Like our tent was the strange thing in the woods, not it." A few days later, I went back to my security job and did my usual rounds. I kept checking cameras, kept listening for sounds that didn't match, kept expecting to see a small shape in the corner of a frame. I never did. But sometimes, on my breaks, I'd pull up photos of Cumberland Falls on my phone, just to prove it was a real place. Just trees and water and tourists smiling in daylight. Normal. And once, late one night, half asleep in the guard shack, I swear I heard a sound outside. A small clean tick, like a stone hitting something it shouldn't. The mud in the Cuyahoga Valley has a specific smell. It's not just dirt and water. It's a mix of rotting hemlock needles, shale, and something metallic, like old pennies left in a cup of water. It sticks to your boots and weighs you down, making every step feel like a commitment. I've been volunteering here for 6 years. I do the gorge cleanups because I like the quiet. I like the way the sandstone ledges eat sound, turning the roar of the nearby highway into a distant hum that you can almost ignore. Usually, I come out here alone, or with a partner I know well, but this weekend the roster was short, and the coordinator stuck me with a jagged little crew that made the silence feel heavy. There was Brent, a guy in his 40s who treated the volunteer work like court-ordered community service, though I'm pretty sure he signed up voluntarily. He spent the first hour complaining about the humidity, his boots, and the fact that we weren't allowed to bring Bluetooth speakers. Then there was Ava. She was a college student, maybe 20. She was dressed all wrong for this. Light canvas sneakers that were soaked through in 10 minutes, and a windbreaker that snagged on every briar. She didn't talk much. She just kept stopping to stare into the dense undergrowth where the sunlight didn't quite reach. We were working a section off the main trail, down near the riverbed where the spring floods usually deposit the worst of the garbage. It's a steep scramble to get down there, and the Park Service doesn't really advertise this area to the casual hikers. It's slippery, dark, and cluttered with driftwood that looks like piled bones. "How much longer are we doing this, Julian?" Brent asked. He was spearing a crushed beer can with his trash picker, missing twice before finally snagging it. "My back is killing me." "We fill the bags we brought," I said, not looking up. I was untangling a fishing line from an exposed root. "Maybe another hour. Just focus on the plastics. The river rises next week, and I don't want this washing into the lake." "Jesus," Brent muttered. "You take this seriously, huh? It's just trash." Ava was about 20 feet away, near a cluster of large rocks. She hadn't put anything in her bag for a few minutes. She was standing perfectly still, her head cocked to the side. "Ava," I called out. "You doing okay over there?" She jumped a little, turning to look at me. Her face was pale, which made the dark circles under her eyes stand out. "I thought I heard something," she said. Her voice was thin, barely carrying over the sound of the water moving over the rocks. "Probably a deer," I said, "or a coyote. They den up in the ledges." "No," she said, shaking her head. It sounded like shuffling. "Wet shuffling," Brent snorted. "It's the woods, kid. Everything shuffles. Let's just hurry up." We kept moving. I took the lead, scanning the ground. We were finding the usual stuff: styrofoam bait containers, plastic bottles, the occasional tire half buried in the muck. I handed a fresh orange heavy-duty bag to Brent because his was getting full. That's when the first weird thing happened. I had just dropped a heavy glass bottle into my own bag. It clinked against the other trash. I walked a few steps, and I heard a sound like fabric tearing. I looked back. Brent was holding his bag, staring at it with a look of total confusion. The bottom of the bag hadn't just split open, it looked like it had been slashed. Trash was pouring out onto the wet leaves. "Cheaped out on the supplies, Julian?" Brent asked, annoyed. "Look at this garbage." "Those are double ply," I said, walking over. "They don't just rip." I knelt down to help him scoop the trash back up. When I grabbed the plastic to tie off the bottom, I stopped. The tear wasn't straight, it was jagged, 3 distinct lines dragging downward, and the edges of the plastic pushed outward. If the bag had snagged on a branch or a rock, the plastic would be pushed in, or it would be a clean slice. This looked like something inside the bag had tried to claw its way out. "Did you put anything sharp in here?" I asked. "Broken glass? A knife?" "Just cans and wrappers, man," Brent said, wiping mud off his hands. "Why?" "Nothing," I lied. I didn't want to spook them. Just a defect in the manufacturing. I double-bagged his mess, tying the knot tight. When I stood up, I looked at Ava. She was watching the bag with wide eyes. She saw it too. She saw the way the plastic curled outward. She didn't say anything, but she moved a few steps closer to me. We moved deeper into the gorge. The walls rose higher on both sides, blocking out more of the gray sky. The air grew colder, trapped between the stone. It felt stagnant, like the breath of a basement that hasn't been opened in years. I tried to focus on the rhythm of the work. Spear, lift, bag. Spear, lift, bag. But the atmosphere had shifted. The birds had stopped singing. Even the wind in the upper branches seemed to have died down. The only sound was our breathing and the squelch of our boots. Ava stopped again. She was standing near a large, flat slab of sandstone that had fallen from the cliff face years ago. It formed a small, dark overhang. "Julian," she whispered. I walked over to her. "What is it?" She pointed at the ground, right at the lip of the overhang. "Look." I squinted. Half buried under a rock, pinned down as if to keep it from blowing away, was a piece of paper. It wasn't trash. It wasn't a wrapper or a newspaper. It was a sheet of white printer paper, damp and crinkled, but still relatively clean compared to the muck around it. I crouched down and moved the rock. It was a drawing. done in crayon. Thick, waxy lines. It showed 3 stick figures standing in a forest. One was tall, drawn with a blue shirt. One was shorter, wide, with a brown shirt. And one was a girl with yellow hair. It was clearly us. The details were crude, but specific. The blue shirt I was wearing, Brent's brown Carhartt jacket, Ava's blonde ponytail. But the figure representing me was wrong. The face had been scribbled over with black crayon, not just a little bit. Whoever drew it had pressed down hard, digging the wax into the paper, creating a violent, swirling void where my eyes and nose should have been. "What is this?" Brent asked, leaning over my shoulder. His breath smelled like stale coffee. "Some kid leave this here?" "It's us," Ava said. She was trembling now. "That's us. Right now." "Don't be stupid," Brent said, though his voice wavered. "It's generic. Just some random drawing." "Look at the boots," I said, pointing. The figure in the blue shirt, me, was drawn wearing bright red boots. I looked down at my feet. I was wearing my old red hiking boots, a color that had been discontinued years ago. "Okay," Brent said, stepping back. "That's creepy. Someone's messing with us. Probably some teenagers watching us from the ridge." He looked up at the cliffs, scanning the tree line. "Hey, you think this is funny?" he shouted. His voice echoed, bouncing off the stone walls, sounding harsh and intrusive. "Don't," I said, standing up. I felt a sudden, intense need to leave. My stomach turned over. "Let's just pack up. We have enough." "I'm not letting some punk scare me," Brent said, puffing his chest out. He was scared, though. I could see it in the way he clenched his fists. He reached down and snatched the drawing out of my hand. "It's just paper." "Brent, put it back," Ava said. It wasn't a request, it was a plea. "Why? It's litter, isn't it? That's what we're here for." He crumpled the paper slightly in his hand, then smoothed it out to mock it. "Ooh, look at the scary scribbles." I was staring at the paper in his hands. The air around us seemed to drop 10 degrees in a second. The smell of copper and wet earth intensified, becoming almost choking. "Brent," I said, my voice low. "Look at the drawing." "I'm looking at it, Julian. It's trash." "No," I said. "Look at the mouth." In the drawing, the figure with the blacked-out eyes, the figure that was supposed to be me, had a simple curved line for a smile, a red crayon line. As we watched, the red line twitched. It wasn't a trick of the light. The wax on the paper physically moved. The curve inverted, twisting into a frown, and then opened. It looked like a wound opening up on the page. The paper fiber stretched and tore silently as the drawn mouth widened, revealing the white pulp beneath. Ava made a sound like she was choking on air. Brent froze, his hands locking up. He tried to drop the paper, but his fingers wouldn't obey. He just stood there, holding it out like an offering. The sound didn't come from the woods. It didn't come from the wind. It came from the paper. It was a whisper, dry and scratching, like dead leaves dragging across pavement. "You left me here." The voice was small, but it hit me with the force of a physical blow. It sounded familiar, terrifyingly familiar. It sounded like a child, but with the cadence of an adult. Brent dropped the paper. It fluttered to the mud, landing face up. The mouth on the drawing was moving again. The red wax lips were forming shapes, syncing with the whispers that were now rising from the mud around us. "You promised. You walked away. It was cold." "I didn't," I stammered, backing away. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Who is that?" Ava screamed. She was backing up so fast she tripped over a root and fell hard onto her backside, scrambling crab-like through the dirt to get away from the paper. "I don't know," I yelled. Brent was hyperventilating. "It's a speaker," he gasped. "It's a hidden speaker." He kicked mud over the paper, burying it. The sound didn't stop. It just got muffled, coming from under the dirt now. Julian. Julian. Darker now. Hungry now. My name. It knew my name. The heavy orange trash bag I was holding, the one slung over my shoulder, suddenly jerked. It wasn't a settle of contents. Something inside the bag kicked me in the back. Hard. I dropped the bag and scrambled away. It hit the ground with a wet thud. We all stared at it. The orange plastic bulged. Something inside was pushing against the membrane, stretching it tight. It looked like a hand. A small hand. "Oh, God," Brent whimpered. "What is in the bag, Julian?" "Just trash," I screamed. "I swear to God, just bottles and trash." The shape of the hand pressed harder. I could see the knuckles white against the orange plastic. Then another bulge, distinct and sharp. An elbow. Then a face. It was pressing its face against the plastic from the inside, like a child pressing their face against a window pane. The features were indistinct, smeared by the plastic, but I could see the hollows of the eyes. Then, the bag began to rip. Not at the seam, but right where the mouth would be. The plastic shredded, and a sound erupted from the tear. Not a whisper this time, but a long, wet inhalation, like someone taking their first breath after drowning. "Run," I said. I didn't wait for them to agree. I turned and scrambled up the slope. I could hear Brent right behind me, his heavy breathing ragged and panicked. Ava was screaming, a high, thin sound that cut through the damp air. We didn't stick to the trail. We just clawed our way up the ravine. I slipped on wet shale, slamming my knee into a rock, but the adrenaline washed out the pain. I grabbed fistfuls of roots and pulled myself up. Behind us, down in the gorge, the sound of tearing plastic multiplied. It sounded like 100 bags were being shredded at once. We hit the main trail and kept running until we saw the parking lot. The sight of the asphalt and the few parked cars felt like waking up from a nightmare. We collapsed against my truck, gasping, covered in mud and scratches. Brent was doubled over, vomiting onto the gravel. Ava was crying silently, hugging herself, rocking back and forth. I looked back toward the tree line. The gorge was silent again. Just the gray trees and the mist. We didn't talk on the ride back. I dropped Ava off at the student center first. She didn't say goodbye, just sprinted inside. I dropped Brent at his car. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes bloodshot and wide. "Don't call me," he said. "Don't ever call me for this again." That was 3 days ago. I haven't gone back to the park. I quit the volunteer program via email. I told them I had a family emergency. I've been trying to rationalize it. Mass hysteria. Hallucinations caused by mold spores or gas pockets in the gorge. A prank pulled by someone with incredible special effects skills. But I can't sleep. Because every time I close my eyes, I see that drawing. And I remember something I had pushed down deep. Something from 20 years ago, before I was a volunteer, before I lived here. When I was 7, my younger brother got lost on a camping trip. Not here, in Pennsylvania. We were playing hide and seek. I was the seeker. I got tired of looking for him, so I went back to the campsite and didn't tell my parents he was still out there until it was dark. They found him the next morning. He was fine. Cold. Scared. But fine. At least, that's the version I tell myself. That's the version that lets me sleep. But since that day in the gorge, the memory feels thinner. Like a screen that's tearing. I have this gnawing feeling that he wasn't fine. Or that the boy who came back wasn't the one I left. I'm sitting in my kitchen now. It's midnight. The house is quiet. But 10 minutes ago, I heard a noise from the pantry. I keep my recycling in there. Heavy-duty orange bags. I heard the crinkle of plastic, a slow, deliberate shifting, and then, a sound that made my blood freeze. The sound of a crayon dragging across paper. Scritch, scritch, scritch. I locked the pantry door. I'm sitting here with a kitchen knife, staring at the handle. Under the door, a piece of paper just slid out. It's a drawing. The wax is fresh. It shows a stick figure sitting at a table, holding a knife, and behind the stick figure, standing right behind his chair, is a small figure with a red mouth that is open way too wide. The pantry doorknob is turning. I didn't leave him in Pennsylvania. I know that now. I don't know where I left him, but he found his way back. The door is opening. It's time to look at the drawing. You don't realize how loud a person actually is until you take them out of the city, and drop them into a canyon carved by a retreating glacier. That was the first issue. The St. Croix River, specifically the section where it cuts deep between Minnesota and Wisconsin, is supposed to be this cathedral of basalt and brown water. It's a place where you shut up and drift. Pete, on the other hand, treated the outdoors like a stadium. Every time he saw a bald eagle, he yelled. Every time he snagged a smallmouth bass, he whooped. He slapped the water with his paddle just to hear the splash. I've known Pete since college, and I usually tolerate him because he's reliable when things go wrong. But out here, enclosed by those high rock walls, his voice just bounced around, shattering everything. Aria was different. She was Pete's girlfriend of about 6 months, and this was my first time really hanging out with her for more than a couple of beers. She was quiet. Not shy, just contained. While Pete was busy shouting at echoes, Aria was staring at the shoreline. She had this habit of picking things up. If we pulled over to a sandbar for lunch, she'd be crouching in the drift, sifting through the silt. She collected feathers. She had a little Ziploc bag tucked in her life vest. By noon on the first day, she had a couple of blue jay feathers, a hawk feather that I'm pretty sure is illegal to possess, and a handful of turkey plumage. She treated them like currency, smoothing them down and sliding them into the plastic with total focus. We did about 10 miles that first day. The water was high for July, moving fast and dark with tannins. We set up camp on a designated site on the Wisconsin side, a flat shelf of dirt elevated above the river. It was a good spot, surrounded by thick maples and oaks that blocked out most of the sky. Dinner was fine. Pete drank too much whiskey, as expected, and told stories I'd heard a dozen times, getting the details wrong in new and irritating ways. Aria sat on a log, arranging her feathers on her knee, ignoring us. The weirdness didn't start with a bang. It started with the sound of aluminum. We turned in around 11. I had my own tent, a small one-man coffin, and they shared a larger dome tent about 10 feet away. I fell asleep pretty fast thanks to the paddling, but I woke up because I needed to take a leak. It was dead quiet. The wind had died down completely. The river usually makes a rushing noise, but here the water was deep and slow, so it was just a low, heavy presence. I was crawling back into my sleeping bag when I heard it. Click. It was a sharp metallic sound, unmistakable. It was the sound of a canoe paddle hitting the gunnel of an aluminum canoe. I froze. Our canoes were pulled up on the bank, overturned. We had shoved the paddles under the seats to keep them from getting stepped on. Click. Clack. It wasn't the sound of an animal rummaging. Raccoons knock things over. They don't tap things. This sounded like someone was testing the material. I unzipped my rainfly slowly and shone my headlamp toward the boats. Nothing. Just the 2 canoes, the gray hull and the red hull, sitting upside down in the weeds. The paddles were hidden beneath them. The beam of my light cut through the humidity, lighting up a swarm of moths, but there was no one there. I sat there for 5 minutes, listening. I told myself it was the metal cooling down, contracting in the night air. That happens. It sounds like a gunshot sometimes. But this hadn't sounded like a pop. It sounded like contact. I eventually went back to sleep, but it was thin sleep. The kind where you're waiting for a noise. The next morning, the mood was off. The woods felt damp, that heavy, oppressive wetness that sticks your shirt to your back before you've even had coffee. Pete was hungover and grumpy, moving slow. Aria was already awake. She was sitting by the cold fire pit, staring at her hand. "Morning," I said, starting the camp stove. She didn't look up. "I found another one." "Feather?" "Yeah." "Cool." I was measuring coffee grounds. "Where'd you find it?" "In my hand," she said. I paused. "What do you mean?" "I woke up," she said, her voice flat, "and my hand was closed tight. It was inside." I looked over at her. She held her palm out. Lying across her skin was a feather, but it didn't look like any bird native to the Midwest. It was long, maybe 6 inches, and jet black, but not the iridescent black of a crow or a grackle. It was a matte, light-sucking black, and it looked wet. It looked like it had been dipped in used motor oil, but when she tilted her hand, nothing dripped. "Pete put it there?" I asked. It seemed like a dumb prank he'd pull. "Pete's asleep," she said. And the tent was zipped. The bug netting was zipped. Maybe it was in your sleeping bag from yesterday? No, she said. She finally looked at me. She looked tired, pale. It feels warm, Brandon. I walked over and looked closer. It was disgusting. The barbs of the feather were matted and thick. It smelled faintly of sulfur and wet dog. Wash your hands, I said. That thing looks nasty. Probably from a sick vulture or something. She didn't drop it. She just closed her fist around it again. Pete eventually rolled out of the tent, looking like a train wreck. We packed up and hit the river. The plan was to do another 12 miles and camp near the Kettle River confluence. The day dragged. The river got wider, the cliffs higher. I usually love this scenery, the way the basalt rises up like fortress walls, covered in moss and ferns. But today it felt like a trench. The sky was overcast, a solid sheet of granite gray, and the air was dead still. Pete was quieter today, mostly because of the headache, but every now and then he'd try to start a song or yell at a heron. His voice sounded thin, swallowed instantly by the trees. I was in the lead canoe with the gear. They were behind me. Every time I looked back, Arya wasn't paddling. She was just sitting in the bow, her hand in her lap, clutching that damn feather. We made camp late, around 6. The site was on a low peninsula jutting out into the current. It felt exposed. The woods behind us were dense, a tangle of underbrush and fallen birch trees that looked like bleached bones. We got a fire going. The mood was brittle. Pete was trying to force the fun, drinking again to chase the hair of the dog. You guys are dead today, Pete said, poking the fire. Come on. Arya, put the rock collection away. Feathers, she whispered. Whatever. It's grossing me out. You haven't washed your hands all day. Pete reached over and grabbed her wrist. Don't, she snapped. It was the loudest she'd spoken all trip. Let me see it, Pete said, his drunk persistence kicking in. He pried her fingers open. The feather was there. It looked bigger. I know that sounds stupid, but it looked thicker, swollen. The blackness of it seemed to vibrate against her skin. And the smell hit me from 3 feet away. A sharp copper reek, like old blood. Jesus, Arya, Pete said. He snatched it out of her hand. No! She screamed. She lunged, but Pete stood up, holding it out of reach. It's covered in grease or something. It's unsanitary. Pete stumbled toward the fire. I'm doing you a favor. He tossed the feather into the flames. We all watched. A feather is protein. It should singe, curl, and stink like burning hair. It should be gone in seconds. The black feather landed on a bed of red-hot coals. It didn't catch. It just sat there. The flames licked around it, but the feather itself seemed to repel the heat. It stayed oily and black. What the hell is that made of? I asked. Then it moved. It wasn't the heat rising or an updraft. The quill of the feather bent. It curled upward, like a jointed limb. It twitched, once, twice, and then rotated on the coals. It pointed. Specifically, it pointed toward the river, toward the downstream point of the peninsula. Did you see that? Arya whispered. She sounded terrified, but also mesmerized. It's just the heat, Pete said, but he sounded sober now. Plastic. Must be synthetic. It's not plastic, I said. The feather twitched again, straining, the tip quivering as it maintained its aim toward the water. I'm going to bury it, Pete said. He reached for a stick to flick it out of the fire. Don't touch it, Arya yelled. A sound came from the river. Click. We all froze. It was the same sound from the night before, aluminum on aluminum. But our canoes were right next to us, pulled up by the fire ring this time. The sound came from the water, about 20 yards out, where the darkness swallowed the river. Click-clack. Is there someone else out here? Pete called out. His voice cracked. Hello? No answer, just the rushing of the water. Then we heard the waiting. Splosh. Splosh. Slow, heavy steps moving through thigh-deep water. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight, the mag light I keep for emergencies. I stood up, heart hammering against my ribs. Who's there? I shouted. The steps stopped. Brandon, light it up, Pete whispered. He was standing behind me. I raised the light and swept the beam across the black water. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The light cut a cone through the mist rising off the river. It hit the water, illuminating the brown chop. Then, the beam hit legs. It was standing about 30 feet from shore, knee-deep in the current. It was tall. That was the first thing my brain registered. Impossibly tall. The legs were pale and hairless, rising out of the water like birch trunks. But the proportions were wrong. The knees were too high. The torso was elongated, stretched out like taffy. It was wearing clothes, or rags that looked like clothes, a tattered flannel shirt that barely covered its ribcage. I moved the light up to the face. I heard Arya make a sound like she was choking. The thing had a face. It was pale, wet, and glistening, reflecting the flashlight beam. It was a long face, drooping and slack, with eyes that were just dark pits, wide-set and empty. But the mouth, it was smiling. It wasn't just a smile. It was Pete's smile. It was the exact same goofy, lopsided grin Pete gives when he catches a fish. The dimple on the left side, the way the lip curled up. But on that stretched, pale head, it looked like a cut. It was a perfect copy of my friend's expression pasted onto a nightmare. "Pete?" Arya whispered. She was looking at the thing, not at the real Pete standing right next to me. The thing didn't move. It just stood there in the current, fighting the flow with those spindly legs, grinning Pete's grin at us. "That's not me," Pete said. His voice was a high whine. "Brandon, that's not me." "I know," I said. My hand was shaking so bad the light beam was dancing all over the creature. The thing raised an arm. The limb unfolded, joint by joint, far too many joints. It pointed a finger at us. No, not at us. It pointed at Arya, and then, in the firelight behind me, I heard a wet, slapping sound. I spun around. The feather was gone from the fire. I looked back at the water. The thing was moving. It wasn't waiting anymore. It had dropped onto all fours, its long limbs bending like a spider's, and it was skittering across the surface of the water toward the bank. It moved with terrifying speed, slapping the water, that Pete grin bobbing violently. "Run!" I said. It came out as a squeak, then I screamed it. "Run!" I didn't wait for them. I scrambled up the bank, toward the dense woods. I heard Pete crashing behind me, heard Arya screaming. We didn't grab gear, we didn't grab keys, we just ran into the dark, tangled gorge. We tore through brambles that ripped our clothes. We tripped over roots. We ran until our lungs burned and the sound of the river faded. We ended up huddled in a ravine about a mile inland, sitting back to back in the dirt, shivering until the sun came up. We hiked out the next morning. It took us 6 hours to find a road. We flagged down a county maintenance truck. The driver looked at us like we were crazy, bleeding, muddy, wild-eyed. We told the sheriff we saw a bear. We told him we panicked and ran. He looked skeptical, but he drove us back to the landing where my car was parked. We didn't go back for the canoes. We didn't go back for the tents. I left $2,000 worth of camping gear on that point. I don't care. The ride home was silent. Arya sat in the back. Pete sat in the passenger seat. I dropped them off at their apartment. Pete got out, mumbled a goodbye, and went to unlock the door. Arya stayed in the car for a second. She leaned forward. "Brandon," she said. "Yeah?" "When we were running," she said, her voice trembling, "I looked back. I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't want to know. And? It didn't chase us," she said. "It went to the fire. It picked up the feather." She opened the door and got out. I haven't seen them much since then. Pete calls me sometimes, wants to get a beer, but I always make excuses. I can't look at him. I saw him once, across the street at the grocery store. He was laughing at something on his phone. He flashed that grin, the lopsided one, with the dimple. I almost threw up right there in the produce section. Because I remember the click. I remember the paddles. And I can't stop thinking about the geometry of that thing in the water. But the worst part, the part that keeps me up at night, isn't the monster. It's the realization I had weeks later. That thing wasn't wearing a mask. It wasn't mimicking Pete to mock us. It was trying the smile on, like it was fitting a piece of clothing. And now, every time I see a crow feather on the sidewalk, or hear a piece of metal tap against a wall, I think about that thing in the river. I think about how it picked up the feather Arya found, and I wonder if it's finished collecting what it needs to complete the set. It was the humidity that got to you first. People talk about the heat in Alabama, but in the Talladega National Forest, specifically down in the cuts where Cheaha Creek runs, the air just sits on you. It's heavy, wet, and smells like pine needles rotting into mud. I checked the GPS, then the map. The GPS was bouncing a signal off the ridges, giving me a circle of error about a mile wide, so I went back to the paper map. I trust paper. Paper doesn't run out of batteries or lie to you about satellite coverage. How much further, Carter? That was Liam, my cousin. He was sitting on a mossy rock, wiping sweat off his forehead with a sleeve that was already soaked through. He looked pale, which was impressive considering his face was flushed red from the exertion. Liam wasn't built for this. He was an accountant from Birmingham who spent his weekends indoors. I was the one who suggested this trip. I thought it would be good for him. Get him out of his head, get him some fresh air. I've been out of the service for 3 years now, and I guess I still have that drill sergeant mentality that thinks physical misery cures mental anxiety. Not far, I lied. We're just going to loop down to the Devil's Den area, check out the falls, and hike back up the ridge. Easy pace. Liam nodded, taking a shaky breath. He was vibrating. I could see his hands trembling where they rested on his knees. It wasn't just fatigue. The kid was spooked. The silence out here isn't empty, it's full. It presses in on the ears. And in a ravine, the acoustics are treacherous. The water crashing over rocks echoes and bounces, making it sound like someone is walking 10 feet behind you when nobody is there. Drink some water, I said, keeping my voice low and level. You dehydrate, you get dizzy. You get dizzy, you panic. I'm not panicking, Liam snapped, but his voice cracked. I don't like this part. The gorge. It feels tight. It's just terrain, Liam. Rock and water. I adjusted my pack. I wasn't carrying much. First aid, water, a K-bar knife strapped to my thigh out of habit, and a Glock 19 concealed in the waistband of my pack. Not that I expected to need a gun for a hike, but old habits die screaming. I felt responsible for him. That was the main thing. I was the sheepdog. He was the sheep. That's how I categorized the world now. We started moving again. The trail here wasn't really a trail. It was a deer run that skirted the edge of the creek. The water was low this time of year, exposing slick, gray stones that looked like the backs of sleeping hippos. The canopy overhead was thick, filtering the sunlight into weird, shifting patterns on the ground. About 20 minutes in, the weirdness started. I was in point, scanning the ground for loose shale, thinking about how we needed to cross the creek soon to get better footing. In my head, I formed the thought clearly. Check the bank for a shallow crossing. Before the words reached my mouth, I heard it. Check the bank for a shallow crossing. It wasn't an echo. An echo repeats what you say. This voice, a dry, raspy whisper, spoke the words exactly as I was thinking them, simultaneous with my own internal monologue. And it came from right behind my left ear, close enough that I should have felt breath on my neck. I spun around, hand instinctively dropping to the knife handle. Liam was 10 feet back, struggling with a bramble that had caught his boot. He looked up, startled by my sudden movement. "What?" he asked, eyes wide. "What is it?" I stared at the space between us. Nothing but dead leaves and humid air. I scanned the tree line. Nothing. "Did you say something?" I asked. "No. I'm trying to get this damn thorn out." I let out a breath through my nose. Stress. It had to be stress. Or maybe a bizarre acoustic anomaly where the sound of the creek warped into frequencies that messed with the inner ear. I'd read about infrasound doing stuff like that. "Keep moving," I said, turning back around. Eyes up. We walked for another hour. The ravine deepened, the walls of rock rising steeper on either side, cutting off more light. The air got cooler, but it felt stagnant. I kept waiting for the whisper to come back, testing it. I'd deliberately think specific sentences. The rock is gray. My boots are heavy. Nothing. Just the rush of the water. We reached a section where the creek widened into a deep, slow-moving pool. The water here wasn't the clear mountain stream type. It was tannin-stained, dark like over-steeped tea. You couldn't see the bottom, just blackness fading into brown at the edges. "Break time," I said. Liam didn't argue. He dropped his pack and practically collapsed near the water's edge. He cupped his hands to splash water on his face. "Don't drink it," I warned. "Giardia will mess you up." I know. Just cooling off." I stood guard, leaning against a hickory tree, watching the perimeter. It's what I do. I watch the lines while others rest. The forest was too quiet now. Usually, you hear squirrels barking, birds calling, the rustle of lizards. But the bioacoustic signature of the area had flatlined. That's never good. In the sandbox, silence meant an ambush. Here, it just meant something was wrong. "Carter." The tone of Liam's voice made my stomach drop. It wasn't loud. It was strangled. I looked over. Liam was frozen, hands still dipped in the water, staring straight down into the pool. He wasn't moving. He looked like a statue. "Liam?" I stepped away from the tree. "There's a man," he whispered. "What?" "In the water. There's a man in the water." I closed the distance in 3 strides, grabbing Liam by the shoulder and hauling him back from the bank. He fought me, not to get away, but to stay looking. "Let me go. He's right there." "Get back." I shoved him toward the rocks and drew the Glock. I didn't care about park rules anymore. I swept the weapon over the water, looking for a threat. A floater? A body? I looked where Liam had been staring. The water was dark, rippling slightly from the current. At first, I saw nothing but the reflection of the overhanging branches. Then, the angle of the light shifted. About 2 feet below the surface, pale against the tannin darkness, was a face. It wasn't a reflection. It was a physical object. It was wide, bloated, and utterly white. It looked like a man, but the proportions were wrong. The eyes were too far apart, and the mouth was just a slit. But the worst part, the part that made the hair on my arms stand up like wire, was that it wasn't floating face down. It was facing up. It was staring at me, and it wasn't dead. The eyes, dark holes in the pale dough of the face, blinked. A slow, deliberate movement. The slit of a mouth twitched, not gasping for air, but smiling. It wasn't drowning. It was waiting. "It sees me," Liam whimpered from behind me. "Carter. It sees me." I didn't freeze. Training took over. Threat identified. Engage or retreat. Engagement was impossible. I wasn't shooting at water. Retreat was the only option. "Grab your bag," I ordered. My voice was calm, but it felt like it belonged to someone else. "Liam, grab your bag. We are leaving. Now." "Is he dead?" "Move," I barked. I didn't look back at the water. I grabbed Liam's arm and physically steered him toward the uphill slope. We needed elevation. We needed to get out of the ravine. The acoustics, the isolation. It was a kill box. We scrambled up the bank, boots sliding on wet leaves. Liam was hyperventilating, making high-pitched wheezing noises. "Breathe through your nose," I hissed. "Control it." We hit the deer trail again, and I set a brutal pace. I wanted distance. I wanted to be back at the truck 5 miles away. "He's going too slow." The whisper was back, right at my ear, wet and intimate. I stumbled, nearly taking a knee. I swung my head around, wild-eyed. Nobody. Just Liam, 10 yards back, struggling to keep up. He hadn't spoken. He couldn't have. He was gasping for air. "Leave him." The voice mimicked my own internal frustration, my own tactical assessment, but twisted it. It sounded like me, but hateful. "Shut up," I muttered. "What?" Liam yelled from behind. "Nothing. Keep moving." We had been hiking for maybe 10 minutes when the footsteps started. At first I thought it was the echo again. I'd take a step, crunch. And a split second later, I'd hear a thud from behind us. but the rhythm was off. I stopped abruptly, holding up a hand to halt Liam. Liam crashed into me, shaking. "Why are we stopping?" "Shh." I listened. Crunch, crunch. 2 heavy steps from down the trail, back toward the creek. Then silence. Something was following us. "Is that a bear?" Liam whispered, tears mixing with the sweat on his face. "Move, faster." We started to run, not a jog, but a panic-fueled scramble over roots and rocks. The terrain was fighting us. Vines snagged our ankles, branches whipped our faces. Behind us, the sound changed. It had been thump, thump, 2 feet, a biped, a man. But as we picked up speed, the rhythm behind us accelerated. It didn't speed up like a man running. It changed cadence entirely. Thump, 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 thump. 4 legs, heavy, galloping. It was the sound of a large animal, something the size of a horse or a massive cat, tearing through the underbrush. But animals don't stalk you on 2 legs for a mile before dropping to 4. "Carter!" Liam screamed. He looked back. "Don't look back!" I grabbed his collar and hurled him forward. The ravine walls were closing in, channeling the sound. The galloping was getting louder, closer. It sounded wet, like slabs of raw meat slapping against the dirt. "He's going to trip. He's going to die here." The whisper was screaming in my ear now, drowning out the blood pounding in my head. "You can make it if you leave him." "I'm not leaving him," I roared at the empty air. We hit a steep incline. This was the way out, a scramble up a rocky wash that led to the ridgeline road. If we made the road, we were clear. It was graveled, open. Liam scrambled up on hands and knees. I stayed behind him, pushing his pack, effectively using my body as a shield. If whatever was behind us caught up, it would have to go through me first. The galloping stopped. Silence slammed back into the woods. We were halfway up the slope. I spun around, gun raised, chest heaving. Down in the wash, about 40 yards back, the shadows were thick. I squinted, sweat stinging my eyes. There was a shape standing by a cluster of river birch. It was pale, tall. It stood on 2 legs. It looked like a man, stripped naked, hairless. Its limbs were too long, hanging down past its knees. It wasn't moving. It was just watching us. Then, it dropped. It didn't crouch like a human. Its knees bent backward, or its spine contorted. I couldn't process the geometry of it fast enough. It fell onto all 4s, its back arching high like a greyhound, and it looked up at me. Even at 40 yards, I saw the face. The same face from the water, the wide-set eyes, the slit mouth. It opened its mouth. Carter. It didn't shout. It didn't growl. The sound originated right next to my ear, as if it were standing beside me. It was my voice. It was using my voice. I fired. I squeezed the trigger 3 times. Pop, pop, pop. The shots cracked through the ravine, deafeningly loud. The dust kicked up around the pale thing. I might have hit it. I might have missed. I didn't wait to check. "Go! Go! Go!" I screamed at Liam. We clawed our way up the last 50 feet of the slope. My fingernails tore on the slate. Liam was sobbing, crawling, pulling himself up by roots. We crested the ridge and spilled out onto the fire service road. The sunlight was blinding. It was brighter up here, hotter, normal. A hawk circled overhead. A jeep was driving slowly in the distance, kicking up dust. We lay on the gravel, gasping. I kept the gun trained on the spot where the trail emerged from the woods. Nothing came out. We lay there for 10 minutes. The only sound was Liam's dry heaving and the wind in the pines. "Did you see it?" Liam asked eventually. His voice was ruined, raspy and thin. "I saw a bear," I said. I put the gun back in my waistband. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I looked down into the ravine. It was just a sea of green trees, peaceful and still. "Carter, that wasn't a bear. It had hands. It was a bear, Liam." I grabbed him by the harness of his pack and hauled him up. I needed him to believe it. If he believed it, maybe I could believe it. It was a sick bear with mange. That's why it looked like that. That's why it ran on 4 legs. He looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot. pupils blown wide. He knew I was lying. "It called your name," he whispered. "Wind," I said. "Acoustics." We walked the 3 miles back to the truck in the center of the road, staying away from the tree line. I drove us out of the forest doing 80 on the winding roads, not caring about the curves. I dropped Liam off at his apartment in Birmingham. He didn't say goodbye. He just got out, locked his door, and closed the blinds. That was 6 months ago. I haven't gone back to the woods. I sold my hiking gear. I spend my time in the city now, where there are streetlights and noise and people. But I still have trouble sleeping. I have to keep a fan on, or the TV, anything to create white noise. Because when it gets quiet, really quiet, I start to think about things. I think about the ravine. I think about that face in the water. And sometimes, just as I'm drifting off, right when my thoughts start to blur into dreams, I hear a voice. It's not a memory. It's fresh. It's right behind my ear, pressing against the skin. "You didn't hit me." It whispers, "Come back."